Can you imagine having a child with autism and sending him away to boarding school where you think he's going to be safe and thrive, and he ends up being sexually molested? So then you take him and send him to another boarding school where he's supposed to be safe and thrive. And for over a year and a half, they torture him like in a concentration camp, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And then he escapes in a kayak. All this and more in this week's remarkable episode of the Remarkable People podcast, The Sean Sullivan Story.
The Remarkable People podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.
Hey friends, today's an episode like we've never had before. We have a young man who was sent to boarding school for his benefit, and it turned out to be a disaster, not once, but twice. So his story is engaging, it's charming, it's entertaining, but it's also mind-blowing. It's real, it's unfiltered, and you're about to hear how this young man was sexually molested, pretty much tortured at another boarding school, was taken to a camp supposedly for a field trip outing. They took away his shoes, and at 2 a.m. he sees a kayak and uses the stars in the Seattle Space Needle to find freedom. So this is a packed episode. It's got a little bit of a slower pace because you're going to hear why, but it is great to give you time to process and appreciate what you're about to hear. Also, if you can do some research, let's work together. The people that hurt Sean have never been caught. They closed the facility down, but these people got away, according to what Sean's telling us. So, hey, if you're in the area, if you know the story, if you're seeing these people or any names sound familiar, reach out to Sean and I, and let's get after them, because these people deserve to be in prison, and you're going to hear why. So I'm David Pasqualone. This is the Sean Sullivan Story. Get ready to be inspired and appreciate life more right now. Hey, Sean, how are you today, brother?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I just told our listeners a little bit about you and your story, and we are all pumped and excited to hear your journey. So at this time, we're going to go through your life journey, where you've been. We're going to get to where you're at today, and then where you're going. And hopefully we know you're going to help us encourage and motivate us. And then hopefully we're going to help you get to your next destination. Sound good?
Sounds better than good.
Awesome. So Sean, let's start off at the beginning. Your child, your birth. Where were you born, and what was your family like growing up? So like, were you born in New Jersey? Were you born in New Mexico? Were you born in Africa? Where were you born?
I was born in Vermont.
Okay. Very nice.
But if you ask me, there's way too many trees there.
Do you have allergies?
I do. I have a lot of environmental allergies.
Yes, I am from Milford, Mass originally. And so I've been to Vermont many times, and when it blooms, it can be bad for us with hay fever, right?
Exactly.
All right. So what was your childhood like? Did you have a mom, a dad, brothers, sisters? What was your family like growing up?
I had a mom and a dad. I still do. They're very supportive of me. And we moved to New Jersey because my dad had gotten a job in New York City at a pretty big insurance company. While I was at New Jersey, which was for roughly 16 to 18 years or so.
Okay. And then did you have any brothers or sisters, or were you the only child?
I had 3 or 4 brothers and sisters.
Okay.
3 or 4, yeah. But later, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but my dad remarried and had more kids.
Okay. So you have more stepbrothers and sisters?
Yes.
Yeah, I have 3 stepsisters and a stepbrother myself.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so you got just a bigger family, right?
Yeah.
So when you were born, did they know you had autism, or was it something that they figured out later as you grew up?
It was something they figured out as I grew up. The main doctor who was supposed to facilitate my birth had a emergency to take care of, so he wasn't able to do it, so he had one of his assistants do it. I believe that, and I don't have any proof of this. This is just one of my opinions, but I believe that if the main doctor had done it, I would not have autism. Again, I could be wrong. That's just what I think. Does that make sense?
100%. So what happened was your other brothers and sisters, they do not have autism. Is that correct?
No, that's correct.
And then when you were born, it wasn't the regular doctor. So your parents and you suspect that maybe there was some malpractice or negligence or even just an accident because of inexperience, and it affected your cognitive development, your brain and your just your being. Is that what you're saying?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. So now when you're growing up, what was childhood like dealing with autism, especially in a home that had brothers and sisters who weren't? Was it difficult? Were they understanding? What was it like growing up as an autistic young man?
For a lot of the time, my brothers and sisters didn't even know I had autism. But
Yeah, before you go on, how old are you right now, Sean? I'm 45. How old are you?
35.
You're 35. So from my generation to yours, just that 10-year span, we didn't even know what autism was when I was a kid. And it was just starting to come to a surface when you were a kid. So is that what you're saying? Like it wasn't even really diagnosed much back then?
Well, to my knowledge, it was diagnosed in my generation, but my parents didn't realize that something was wrong. They didn't realize that I had something called autism, and therefore they didn't take me to a diagnosis office because they didn't think that there was any need to.
Got you. So
Because
did they send you
Yeah.
to public school? When did they start recognizing that you were struggling?
I would say when I was like between the ages of 5 and 10.
5 and 10. Okay. And were you
Yeah.
going to public school at this point? Private school, homeschool?
I was still in the special education system.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then was that a good experience for you, or was that
I would I would say it was a better experience for me than it would have been if I was in the public school system.
so between when you were born and when you're about 10 years old now, and they figure out that you're going to be put in the special education program, is there anything else that happened in your life that was significant that you want to talk about, or do you want to move forward in the story to get to the part that you and I discussed over the phone?
That I can immediately come up with. Nothing significant happens. No.
Okay. So then how did
Yeah.
you go from special education school? Where did you go from there? Did you go to high school? Did you go to public school? Did you go to boarding school? Where did your life go at that point?
At that point, I continued to go to different special education schools until I was the age of, I want to say 13 or 14.
Okay. And then did your brothers, forgive me, how many brothers and sisters? I know you said you had 4, but how many brothers and how many sisters were there?
I have 2 brothers and 1 sister.
So there's 4 of you, 2 brothers, 1 sister. And how did you
And
guys?
my 2 brothers actually are identical twins.
Oh, wow. So they had an extra close bond. Besides being brothers, they had a close bond that only twins have. So did you
Correct.
feel close to them, or did you feel a distance?
Off and on.
Off and on?
Yeah.
All right. What about your sister? Did you feel close to her back then, or was there a distance there?
Sometimes we get along and sometimes we don't.
Like normal brother and sister, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then when you were about 15, where do you go to school from there? What happens in your life and your family?
I went to different boarding schools.
Okay. And why boarding schools? To get you the special education you need? Was your home, did they move? What was going on to send you to boarding school?
The school district recommended it to my parents, and my parents they agreed to it.
Because they wanted the best care for you to get you the best education?
Yeah. However, they didn't realize that sending me to boarding schools would have a very bad effect on me.
Yeah, what we're going to
They-
talk about is really incredible.
Yeah.
Before we get to that point, though, were you excited to go to boarding school, or did you not want to go?
I wasn't excited at all.
And I'm sure your parents loved you and didn't want you to go, but they felt it was the best thing for you. Is that correct?
That is good. They thought it was the best thing for me, as well as the school district as well.
Okay, so the school districts recommend it to your parents. Your parents are considering this, and they decide to send you to boarding school. At this point, your parents were in New Jersey still?
That's correct.
Okay. And then where did they send you to boarding school?
They sent me to boarding school in Pennsylvania, in Delaware, and Oregon, and Michigan.
Now that's a lot of boarding schools. So go through each one. What happened at each boarding school that made you move to another one?
So in Pennsylvania, I moved to a different board. The reason why the Pennsylvania boarding school didn't work out was because I didn't, I really didn't like it. And so I continued to try and just leave and get back home because I didn't like being away from home, and so I guess the professional term is running away and eloping, I guess.
Yeah, instead of running away from home, you're running to home.
Yeah.
So, well, let's do this. So you go to Pennsylvania and then you try to run away. So then they tell you you need to go to a different boarding school. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then where do you go from there?
From there, I go to a boarding school in Delaware.
Okay. And was that school a good school and you just didn't want to be there again, or did anything happen?
It was even worse.
Okay, describe worse. Like your loneliness and your sadness was worse, or did they treat you badly?
They treated me badly.
What did they do, or what was life like there?
While there, I was sexually abused.
I'm sorry, was it by the staff that abused you or by other students?
One other student.
By another student. Did you, when you told, did you tell someone right away? Were you scared?
I told someone right away.
And what happened at that point?
They took me to the police. The police questioned me about it on a couple of different occasions, and the end result was they didn't believe me.
And what did your parents say about all this? Did they believe you, or did they side with the police? What did they think?
They believe me.
Okay. So then they pulled you out of that school and sent you to Oregon.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay. And O- Oregon is where things got really crazy, right?
that's correct.
Okay. So let's talk about Oregon. Do you remember that part of Oregon it was? Was it like Medford? Was it Central Point? Was it Eugene? Do you remember the part of Oregon this was in?
I believe it was in Klamath Falls.
Oh, Klamath Falls. That's Southern Oregon. I know exactly where that is. Okay. So talk about that. So now your parents, you get sexually abused. They're sending you to a boarding school to get you help. So then they find out about another school in Oregon and they send you there. And talk about this. What happens at this point in your journey, Sean?
So at this point in my journey, I'm very distraught. I'm feeling a lot of negative emotions because of all the many boarding schools that I've been sent to. And things only get worse from here. While I was at the school, I was forced to sleep outside on the concrete with no covers and no pillow. Students and teachers would pour cold water on me while I was asleep. I was not allowed to go out in the community. And when I asked the question, why? Why are you doing this to me? And what did I do to deserve this? Their response was, you deserve it because you have autism.
Now, what kind of school was this? Was it a school that was supposed to help with autistic students? Or
I was
was
the only
this?
I was the only one with autism too.
So how did you end up at that school? Like, how did your parents find out about that school to make them send you there?
The the school marketed themselves to be a disability safe haven, basically.
Gotcha.
But that wasn't the case, though.
Were there other kids there with disabilities, or was it?
Yes,
Okay. Okay. Now, sleeping outside year round with no covers or pillow, how did they even justify that? I mean, that's stuff that happens in prison camps. What, why did they do that? And what did they say? What was their excuse for that kind of horrific treatment?
they didn't give a excuse at all. They didn't give a reason at all. I can only imagine that the logic was that they hated me for a unknown reason, and I don't know. I don't know why. I've I asked them numerous times, but they gave the same answer as the hundreds of times that I've asked them, which is you deserve it because you have autism.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, then I'm going to let you just move on with your story because it's such a powerful, powerful story. I just wanted to make sure we kind of set up the framework for this. What was the name of that school in Oregon? Because I don't want to jump ahead, but at this point, what was the name of the school?
Crater Lake School.
Crater Lake.
School.
Okay. Crater Lake School. Okay.
Kind of like the National Oregon Park.
Yep. Crater Lake is a beautiful place. I've gone there
It's
many
gorgeous.
times. Yes, it is gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. So the Crater Lake School. Now, let me ask you a couple more questions before we move forward. While this abuse was going on, they're treating you badly. They're telling you you have a disease of autism. Was there anyone at that school, at that boarding school, that was kind to you? Like, was there other students? Was there any faculty? Did anybody treat you nicely?
There were a couple people, but they did it in secret because they were afraid that they would get treated similarly if they were found treating me with dignity by the other students and teachers.
And then at this time, how long was this? I know we're gonna get to the point where they take you on a field trip, but how long was this going on for? Like from the time you got there until the time you go on the field trip you're gonna tell us about. How long was that?
So in total, I was there for about a year and a half.
A year and a half. They had you
Yeah.
sleeping outside, no sheets, no covers, no pillows for a year and a half.
I'm being told, yes, definitely.
Yeah, no, I'm just making sure that our listeners understand the timeline and the cruelty of this. Okay, so talk about now the last question I have before you share the story, and I'm going to stop talking. What about your parents? Did you get to talk to them during this year and a half? Did you tell them?
I did, yeah.
And what did they say?
They thought I was acting. They thought I was just imagining it.
So based on up until you went to boarding school, there was no issues with your relationship with them or trust or stories, correct? Like there was no history of you lying to them. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then when you got sexually assaulted, molested in that first facility, now they're like, we believe our son, but they can't prove it. And now you go to another facility and now it's another like very strong accusation. So now they're starting to question, oh, maybe it is our son lying to come home. Is that what was going on?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. So now let's just talk about this. You're being tortured for a year and a half. You're being treated like not even a human. Tell us the story.
So the authorities, after months and months of running away, being brought back by the police, running away, being brought back by the police finally thought of the possibility that something might be going on. And so just as the school was about to be shut down or be investigated and ultimately be shut down, the school took us on a outing on a field trip from the school in Oregon to a island in Washington under the guise of a field trip. But it really was for the purpose of them not being shut down and not losing their money source. And so we arrived on the island in Washington State. During our exploration of the island, I was really fortunate to have found a way out, which was in the form of a kayak. Unfortunately, the staff took my shoes away.
And
So
how long were you on this island? Like you arrive at the island. Was it the same day they took your shoes away and you saw the kayak? Or were you there a few days? How long were you walking around barefoot?
So they took my shoes away on the day we arrived on the island. I found the kayak on the same day. And I waited until like 2 a.m. the next day. And I kayaked off the island to Seattle. I went to the police. I told them everything. And that's how the school got shut down.
And getting in a kayak at 2 a.m. in the pitch black night, no shoes. How often have you kayaked in your life at that point?
Honestly, that was my first time.
Yeah, you're kayaking in the ocean, which is freezing cold, and it's your first time in the middle of the night. So
Yeah.
how did you navigate and find your way?
So the island was super close to Seattle, and it was there were a lot of stars out, and so I believe I'm not a religious person, but I believe that God was helping me escape.
100%. I have no doubts. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
So talk about that. So you get in this kayak, it's 2 a.m. You paddle yourself to Seattle. And what happens when you get to Seattle, Sean?
When I got to Seattle, I had no idea where the police station was. However, I did see a highway, and so I immediately went to the highway, and I pretended like I was a cheerleader in hopes that someone would call the police. And someone did call the police. The police arrived. They questioned me, and I told them everything. They confirmed my story with their sources, and that's how the school got shut down.
Now, were any of the people that absolutely that was a form of torture? Were the people that tortured you and were being paid to do it, did any of them go to prison or face jail time?
They disappeared.
They disappeared.
Yeah,
Scumbags. Okay.
I agree.
Okay. So now your story doesn't end there. You're at
No, it
this
doesn't.
place for a year and a half. You walking outside of an island outside of Seattle. God leaves a kayak for you. You get in, you take it to Seattle. You find the police by cheerleading on the side of the highway, which was one of the busiest highways in the US. And then from there, you finally have the police listening to you. They confirm what you're saying. And what was it like that night at the police station?
Adrenaline was super high. I was sweating, even though it was really cold. My hand was shaking. The whole 9 yards.
So when you're at the police station, how long were you at the police station?
I slept the night there until my mom arrived from New Jersey to get me. I was told that she took a plane.
Okay. So your mom flew out and she's there with you. Now, were your mom and dad together at that point or had they
No,
separated?
they separated
Okay. So your mom was still in New Jersey and your dad was in California.
at the time. Yeah,
Okay. Now, did any of them visit you in the year and a half you were in Klamath Falls, Oregon at this terrible place?
they did. Yeah,
And when they were there, they didn't see anything wrong or any kind of abuse?
the when my parents visited me, the the students and the teachers were all on their best behavior.
And did they give you a bed to sleep in while your parents were there? Sean, can you hear me?
Say that again.
I said when your parents were there visiting, did they give you a bed to sleep in or how did that work?
They did. Yes. Yeah.
And then when your parents would leave, they take it away?
Yep.
Horrible. Horrible. Okay, so now you're back with your mom. You're in Seattle at the police station. Where does your story go from there?
So from there, I go back to New Jersey, and I find out a couple months later that the owner of the school, at the time, her name is Bobby Christensen, but she had a very similar ending in California. She used to own a summer camp in California. At that time, her name was Bobby Trot. But the summer camp had a couple of deaths there. A couple of people died at the summer camp. So it got shut down, and she moved from California to Oregon. She changed her name and opened a boarding school. I didn't find that out until after I left the school.
So now you're with your mom in New Jersey, and where does your life go from there? How long were you with your mom before you made the next move?
I was with my mom for 4 to 6 months, I think.
Okay. And was that nice
And
having time to be safe and in your own bed?
it was, I was super happy and super at peace. I was excited.
Okay. And then now you're with your mom, but she's divorced. Your dad and her had divorced. So what brings this next boarding school into play after you've been abused so badly at two others?
They wanted to try it just one more time.
Okay. And where do you go from there? I think you said Michigan.
Yes, in Michigan.
And what happens when you arrive in Michigan?
I run away again. This time I go from Michigan to California. However, I did give the school in Michigan a chance. I was there for about 9 months, I think. And the people in Michigan at the school was very nice and kind. They treated me well. It's just that I didn't want to be away from home anymore.
Understandable. Understandable. So where did you go from there, and how did you get there?
So I went out to people and I said, I represent the Red Cross, and we are seeking donations. and I used that money to pay for a bus ticket so I could get to where my dad was again.
And how old were you at this point in the story?
Between 16 and 19.
Between 16 and 19. And you raise money. You're like, I'm with the Red Cross taking donations. You get enough money, you get the plane ticket, you go to California. And what happens when you get to California?
When I get to California at my dad's apartment, my dad wasn't there at the time, and the door was locked. So I went through the window, and I was super hungry, and so I heated up some food. I sat on the couch, turned on the TV, and that's when my dad and Steph came in to find me doing those things.
And what was the reaction when they saw you? They thought you were in Michigan. What was that like?
They were super surprised, obviously. Their reaction was disbelief.
And then, so now you're there. What
Yeah.
happens at that point? What did you guys decide on?
They put me in a school in the same town as they were.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you still there, or how? That was a long time ago. So they put you in a school in the same town they were. And then where do you go from there?
I'm still in California to this day.
Okay. Are you with your dad? Are you at the school? Where are you at?
I'm right now. I have a roommate.
Okay. So you have your own place with a roommate?
Yeah. Yep.
Very nice.
But the important part is that it's in California where my dad is, and also my mom lives in California as well.
Oh, your mom moved to California. Very nice.
Yeah.
So you get to see them much more often now, correct?
Correct.
Good. So today you're in California, you have your own place. What's Sean's life like, and where are you headed, my friend? What's your purpose? What's your plan? Where are you going?
That's a good question.
Currently, I have my own nonprofit. The name of my nonprofit is I Know Autism Foundation. And the mission of my nonprofit is to inspire people with disabilities, mental health challenges, and diseases by giving memorable speeches at hospitals, at schools, at events, and so on.
Excellent. If someone wanted to learn more about your nonprofit or maybe even support you, what's the best place for them to go? Is there a website? Is there an email address?
I'm fortunate enough to have a website, and so the URL of my website is iknowautism.org.
So I know autism.org. And I'll put a
And
link to the show notes to that site for people can click on it.
thank you.
Well, Sean, you truly have had a remarkable journey. You're 35 years young now, right? You're about 35, you said?
Yeah.
And where are you going and how can we as the listeners help you get there?
I'm trying to write a book that that talks about my story. However, at the time of this interview, I don't have the funds to pay for a ghost, and so I'm trying to seek financial assistance for that purpose, to write a to have a book written about my story. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, well, what we'll do is, again, I'll put a link to your website in the show notes so people can check it out and donate if they can. And then off
Okay.
camera, I know a couple people who do ghostwriting, and we'll see if we can kind of connect you to and see what comes of that. And I'm guessing a great name for the book would be the Kayak, right? What were you thinking for a title?
I would totally agree. That was my idea as well.
Yeah, that kayak, like you said, God just put it there. Most people flip over in a kayak on a lake, let alone in the ocean in the middle of the night with no experience. So that is so cool that God used that to help free you. And Sean, you truly are a remarkable man. I'm proud to be your friend and thankful to have you on the show. Between your birth and today, is there anything else we missed or didn't talk about, or any kind of special message you want to share with our audience before we close up for the day?
The main message that I want to give to the listeners is to never give up, never give in, and never surrender to difficult situations. Instead, make the difficult situations give up, give in, and surrender to you. There's a poem titled the Don't Quit poem that I really try to live by. The poem, I think, is I don't have access to it right now, but you and the listeners can find it online if you're interested.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that. I'll try to find it. If I can, I'll contact you and you can send it to me, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that as well.
Okay, good.
All right, Sean. Well, thank you, my friend, for being on the show today. And to our listeners around the world, we hope this episode helped inspire you and motivate you. And like Sean said, never quit, never give up, never surrender. Always keep moving forward. And like our slogan to the show says, don't just listen to this great content that you heard today from Sean, but apply, do the parts that you need in your life, repeat it each day so you can have a great life in this world and, more importantly, in the eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. This was Sean Sullivan, and we hope to see you again next week at the Remarkable People Podcast. Sean, thank you again for being here today, brother.
Likewise, it was a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that we can keep in contact after the show as well.
Oh, absolutely, my friend. Absolutely. So we're going to close this episode. Our listeners, please like this, share it, let other people use it for hope as well. And we'll see you in the next episode. And Sean, you and I will be talking soon. Ciao.
Excellent.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.